Okay, one person's awake, so that's a good start. Man, you made it through 2 weeks. How many of y'all feel like it's been like way more than 2 weeks? Okay, at least we're all like confessional together in that. Somebody asked me like yesterday. I got it. See, I don't know. Maybe it's been like week 8. Who knows? Somebody was asking me like saying something about like the day, like, yeah, on Wednesday. And I was like, wait, what is today? And I was like, I don't even know what day it is. Yeah, it's hard to go, like, have 1 week of school and then have this long weekend, and then you're like, now I don't even know anymore. But if you're new here, I am so glad that you're here. My name is Shannon. I'm the Baptist student minister here, and we have amazing staff sprinkled all around. And we also have tonight some awesome churches. So if you're looking for a church, you will have a time at the end to go and meet all of these wonderful people that we have here, from our friends and places of worship. And maybe you're like, well, I have a church, I've been there for like 20 years. Some of y'all are 20. You know, you've been there your whole life, and maybe you're not looking for a church. But I also encourage you at the end to go meet them, because you might be on campus and run into somebody, and they're not close to wherever your church is. And so get to know them, and so you can, these are people that we trust. So get to know them so you can encourage others to go. Tonight we're going to talk about the church. We're going to start in Ephesians 5, maybe a weird place to start, but I Googled like the importance of church, right? Because maybe we think about what is important, and when we're looking for a church or we're participating in a church, what are the things that are important? What's the importance of it? I've in my lifetime have come across people who said, well, I don't really need church. I just like listen to a sermon online, and that's fine. But I think there's more here to the importance of it. So in Googling it, it said it is God's divinely appointed family and bride for Christ, essential for believers to grow in their faith, receive spiritual support, and participate in God's ongoing mission to reach the world. The church provides a place for communal worship, biblical teaching, and the exercise of spiritual gifts, enabling believers to function as the vital body of Christ on earth, functioning as a beacon of heavenly values in a world that needs to see Christ's love in action. I wondered when I read that, does AI know better than most of us for the importance of church? That was beautiful. I was like, man, yeah, I'm just going to leave and go to church. Okay, just go find another body of believers and just dive in. This is so beautiful of what it sees as the importance of this body of believers. And so I wanted to ask Webster, like, what's the definition, right? Because some people, we get in these like discussions of like, what is the church? And we always say here that this is a ministry. We are not a church. So I want to look at what is a church when we're talking about church. And so Webster's definition, a building for public and especially Christian worship, a body or organization of religious believers, such as the whole body of Christians. Right, so in some ways we are, as we are believers gathered together, we are the church, the body of believers growing together. But we say this is a ministry, not a church, because there are things that we don't do, some of the sacraments that we leave for our churches to do. There are things that are going to be very familiar at the BSM that you would do at your church. We worship. We do Bible studies. We disciple others. Like, hopefully these are things that are happening in your church. We eat, mainly because we're Baptists, but also because we're a ministry of the church. And we have amazing churches that bring us food. But to look at these definitions, right? A family, a body, a bride. This is relational. This is about a community of people who are together seeking the Lord and serving in the world. to look for a church. Some of y'all, like I said, you've been at a church, you're like, I'm not looking for a church. I have a church. I belong to a church. Some of y'all, you're like, I went away. My church is somewhere else that I grew up in. And what are the important things to look at? I wanted to start in Ephesians 5 because I want us to see the importance and the beauty of the church. And this is a passage maybe that we wouldn't think of looking at for the church. We might think about it, maybe you've heard it at weddings, but Ephesians 5:25 through 27, and it says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. When you think of the church, when you think of church in general, is that the picture of the church that you think of? Holy, blameless, radiant. You know, some of you, maybe you have experiences with churches, and that's not what comes to mind. And I am so sorry for that. Because this is the picture of how much Christ loves the church. The body of believers gathered together to do the kingdom work in this world so that we can say together, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. But sometimes it gets messy, right? That it becomes imperfect. There are things that maybe we disagree with or we don't like. And Paul is writing this, giving this description of how Christ loves this bride of his, the church. And he's writing it to a church that sits in the shadow of one of the 7 wonders of the world in Ephesus, in the temple of Diana, a goddess who is known for fertility, for sexual immorality, for anything goes to get what you want. And he's looking at the body of believers there and saying, that is not what worship looks like to our King. Our King loves his body of believers. It wasn't about how much this body, this church could do for our God, but what he did for this body of people. He said, I've come down. Christ came down to us and made us holy and blameless. He said, you're looking out at a temple and out at goddess worship, and that's not it. If you think our God is like that, and that's what your worship should be, about how much you can do in order to get something, this is a reversal of that. It says our God is different. To have that type of love that says, I will sacrifice for you. Where this temple worship was about how much you sacrificed for her. This contrast, this is how much he loved the church. His bride seemed blameless, holy. And maybe we think, man, I've never been in a church that's perfect like that. Well, it's okay. Charles Spurgeon said, the day we find the perfect church, it becomes imperfect the moment we join it. So if you haven't found the perfect church, maybe it's because you're in it, and I'm in it. Anybody got offended? I'm sorry. But it's true, right? We are imperfect people trying to live out this life that God calls us to, and therefore it is imperfect. I get to lead business meetings in the church that I attend, that I belong to, and just a few weeks ago I had to come back to the church and be like, listen, I did not memorize the bylaws and I did things all out of order. So now I got to form a committee so they can figure it out. Right? That was on me, because there was an imperfect person trying to lead. And I didn't memorize for the test. May that be a note to you, in case that's helpful for your semester. So Paul is telling them this is the best of what it is. This is who you are. This is what coming together and being a community of faith and working out your salvation with fear and trembling to Christ and Christ's eyes, it is perfection. It is radiant. It is beautiful. And don't you want to be a part of the thing that Christ sees as beautiful and radiant? And we get to be a part of that. I now want to flip over. Last week we were looking at Paul's life. We looked at his conversion, right? The road to Damascus, and that he was blinded by the light, and he goes and he's in this house, like just trying to wait for something to happen. And Ananias comes and lays hands on him, and he receives sight, and he tells him, this is what you have met Jesus, and now your life is different. And so I want to pick up on that story because I think we learn Paul's heart from the church for the very beginning. Right? He had this heart for the Lord. He was willing to persecute people, to kill people for the sake of his synagogue, for the sake of his temple. He had this deep love, but he didn't understand it. He didn't understand that this Jesus was real. And now he has to relearn all these things. So we're going to flip over to Acts chapter 9. And kind of finish his story. And it's just a few verses in chapter 9, and starting in verse 19. And there's a first part to 19, but we're going to jump down to the second part of 19. It says, Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. At once he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. All those who heard him were astonished and asked, isn't he the man who raised havoc in Jerusalem among those who call on the name? And hasn't he come here to take them as prisoners to the chief priests? Yet Saul grew more and more powerful and baffled the Jews living in Damascus by proving that Jesus is the Christ. So here he has been blinded. Ananias comes, lays hands on him. He receives the Holy Spirit. He knows that he has met face to face with the risen Lord. And then we think of maybe Saul, who we know more as Paul in the scriptures, but we think of him as like, and then he just like went out and all of his missionary journeys. But it says, and then he went and met with the believers in Damascus. Of all the things that he could have done after coming face to face with Jesus, and he knew a lot. He knew so much. He knew the scriptures. He knew the territory. He knew the laws. He knew so much. And it says, and then he went and met with them. See, there's something that he knew he needed from this body of believers. He, throughout his ministry, we think of Paul just sort of like going off. He always had this community of believers with him as he was going to share the gospel and create new churches. His love for the church was so important to him that once he received sight, he says, where are they? Where are these believers? See, even he had things that he still needed to learn. He didn't know everything. Maybe you're like, well, Shannon, I'm like 19, I know things. I have it all worked out. I'm 23. I'm in my 6th victory lap of college. I'm not going to call anybody. That's nobody here. That's not you. Y'all are the top tier. Y'all are top tier. Right? Like, we can come with our assumption that we know things. And here he was, and he knew so much. But he said, there's still so much I need to learn from the believers in Damascus. The very people I was coming here with a letter to take back to Jerusalem to imprison. He said, these are the people I need to learn from. They know something about Jesus that I still need to learn. So, do y'all know what these are? Oh man, look at y'all. Good job, y'all. You're ready to get an A. So, do you know the difference of these spoons?
One's big and one's little. One's metal and one's plastic.
Oh.
One's silver and one's red.
Oh man. Okay. I wasn't ready for all that. Yeah. Here are these two spoons. And I want us to think about what are their purposes. Eating and cooking. Now, some of y'all mix them up, and this is y'all's eating. But right, this one is for eating. Right, this is how we take in food and nourishment. So Saul, after he receives his sight, he goes to the church, and what does he do? Takes in. Right, so this is an important part of the church to take in. So when you're looking for a church or you're thinking about your church, is this a place where you are getting nourishment? I didn't say preference of how you're getting it. Are you getting nourished? Are you being fed the word? Are people pouring into you? This weekend, we're certified as foster to adopt parents, and so we fostered this little 2-year-old boy. And I got him out of nursery, and I took him into the narthex of our church, or commons. Do y'all have places in your church where nobody knows what to call it? We have that. And he is so excited, he takes off running. And he is just running, and then he turns quickly and goes into the sanctuary. And this little kid is so social. This sanctuary, people had already started leaving, there are a few people. He goes into the middle of this one whole family and group and just stands in the middle of them. He had just been in Sunday school with all his friends, but he needed to be right in the middle of this whole group. And then he stood there and he just turned around and looked at everything in wonder. How many times have we walked into the church in the middle of the people and awed at God? See, he was displaying this radiant body, this place, this presence of God. He didn't know. He's just this tiny little dude. But he went straight to the middle of a whole group of people. I had to look at the people and I'm like, oh, sorry, here's your new best friend. And they were just laughing because they were in the middle of a conversation. He didn't care. He was like, I'm joining in. I don't know what you're saying. But he was in awe and wonder and standing in the middle of the community doing it. I loved that picture. But then it says, then that Saul went to the synagogue and started teaching about Jesus. So then he goes out, a serving spoon. Now, some of y'all eat your cereal with this, and you no need to have any shame about that. But, and maybe your Cool Whip jar. Some of y'all felt convicted. So you have your serving spoon. Now, this is not for intaking. You'll drown yourself, or you'll overeat. But this is to serve others. Right? He went out. He gave away. He taught others, right? We think of him just jetting out to do missions, but what he does, he spends all these years learning from the church, growing, before he ever goes out on a missionary journey. But in his local place, he had this community of believers, and then he goes and serves. He says, I'm not going to go very far. I don't know, I'm kind of new to this. Let me just go to the synagogue and tell them the little bit I know. Let me give it to them. Y'all poured into me, now let me go give that away. So in your church, you have a spoon, but but you have a serving spoon. Don't go to a congregation and say, hey, what are y'all gonna give me? Also look for places that you can serve. How are they supporting you and growing you so you can go out and serve? And serving doesn't necessarily have to look like, although I hope it does, that you go on a mission trip or go serve in the city with your community. But it may look like serving people right around you. Start there. Growing up, I grew up in the same church that my great-grandparents were, my grandparents are. We have like 5 generations in this church. And when my grandmother was passing away, and I was in my 20s maybe, and it was around Christmas time, and she always sang in the choir. She had been there since, she sung in the choir like 71 years or something crazy. And they were doing this cantata, and my whole family was like either serving as an usher in the choir, and I had come home, and my meemaw, because in Texas you gotta have a meemaw, meemaw was passing away, and I was in the pew by myself, and they like dedicated this thing to her, and I'm just like weeping. And Miss Joyce Fuller, who was my first and second grade Sunday school teacher, was sitting on the same pew down there, and she moved over, and she just grabbed my hand and held it during the whole service. Miss Joyce, she was serving. Right? Serving doesn't look like you have to go to a foreign place and pour out to somebody else. It may look like, what are you noticing that you can serve? Use your gifts in that place called the church. So in a minute, we're going to have some small groups and some questions to talk about. But I want you to think about, what does the church mean to you? How will you use this year to invest, to plug into a community where you're being fed and where you serve? It's a balance of both. I always tell people, this is not the church because you need 4-year-olds and 84-year-olds speaking into your life. None of them have a filter, and you need to hear what they have to say. Right? If you're just in a place where it's only the people that are your age, y'all are nice. Y'all are nice to each other. Because you don't want people telling you stuff. So you're going to be nice to each other. Right? But Miss Mabel, she don't care. Little Johnny, he'll tell you what he thinks. And we need that. We need that iron sharpening iron. C.S. Lewis said, the church exists for nothing else but to draw men into Christ, to make them little Christ. If they are not doing that, all the cathedrals, clergy, missions, sermons, even the Bible itself, are simply a waste of time. God became man for no other purpose, to make us little Christ. So find a place that will help you become little Christ. So where are student leaders? They all are spread out everywhere. Okay, we didn't plan this, so